Have you ever spent a night somewhere that just felt off? A place where the silence was too heavy, the shadows too deep, and the air seemed charged with something unseen? In 1974, Stephen King had exactly that kind of experience. One night in an empty, eerie hotel in Colorado was all it took for him to create one of the scariest stories of all time, The Shining. But what really happened that night? Haunted places have fascinated people for centuries. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, some places just feel different. Sometimes, a single night in the wrong place can change your entire perception of reality. And that's exactly what happened to Stephen King. What he experienced didn't just terrify him, it became fuel for his imagination. The Shining isn't just a ghost story, it's about isolation, madness, and the fear that lurks deep inside us. And it all started with one terrifying night. It was 1974. Stephen King was already a promising writer, but he was struggling. Even after the success of Carrie, he felt intense pressure to make sure his next book would be just as good. But he had no idea what to write about. To clear his head and hopefully find some inspiration, he and his wife, Tabitha, took a short trip to Colorado. By chance, they ended up at the Stanley Hotel, a massive old Victorian building, hidden in the mountains and surrounded by endless forests. It was the end of the tourist season. The hotel was practically deserted. That night, the Kings were the only guests. And something about the empty hotel just felt wrong. The long, silent hallways seemed to stretch forever. The air was thick, heavy, and smelled of old wood and dust. Every sound echoed off the walls, making the place feel even bigger than it already was. It was like the building itself was alive. That first night, King felt uneasy. As he was getting into bed, he had the overwhelming sense that he wasn't alone. The hotel was dead quiet. Yet, he could swear he heard things. Faint whispers, soft shuffling. The distant sound of furniture moving in the empty rooms above him. Then came the dreams. King had a nightmare about his 3-year-old son running down a long, dark hotel hallway. Something unseen was chasing him. The boy was screaming in pure terror. In the dream, King was frozen. He couldn't move. He couldn't help. The darkness was closing in on his child. He woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat. His heart pounded against his ribs. As he sat up, trying to shake off the fear, he noticed something strange. The closet door was open, but he was sure he had closed it before bed. For a moment, he thought he saw something lurking in the shadows, watching him. That was it. King realized this wasn't just an unsettling night. It was the seed of an idea. Before the sun even came up, he sat down and started writing notes. The vision was clear. A giant, empty hotel. A man slowly losing his grip on reality. A dark presence watching everything. In The Shining, King turned himself into Jack Torrance, a writer who moves into an isolated hotel with his family, hoping to work on his book, only to spiral into madness. But The Shining wasn't just a ghost story. It was a reflection of King's own fears, his struggles, his worries about hurting the people he loved, and the terrifying idea that isolation could drive someone insane. The Stanley Hotel became legendary. And The Shining? It became one of the greatest horror stories of all time. King turned his own fears into a nightmare that still haunts readers and moviegoers today. But here's the question. Was it just a nightmare? Or was there really something lurking in the darkness that night? What about you? Have you ever experienced something you just can't explain? Ever been somewhere that made you feel like you weren't alone? Share your story in the comments. And if you love horror stories and want to hear more about the eerie inspirations behind them, check out our other videos. The real nightmare might be closer than you think. Just look into the dark,